It is Friday, June 4th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone. We are now very close to the E3 season. We're pretty much in there now, and we're also 1 week away from Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart and Final Fantasy VII Intergrade Edition, so a lot of stuff happening. We're also a week away from those DualSense controllers launching as well, the black and the red one, so a lot of stuff going on. We'll be covering all that, but let's start off the show as always with our PlayStation Plus reminder. The June games are now available, so make sure you go ahead and grab these, add them to your library. PS5 benefit, Operation Tango, the PS4 games, Star Wars Squadrons, and Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown. And also we can confirm and also go over the entire list for the June PS Now editions, which that list we talked about last week was mostly correct. So The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, that'll be available until September 6th. Then Sonic Team Racing, Sonic Mania, Sonic Forces, also day and date Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown if you have PS Now and not PS Plus. Car Mechanic Simulator, and Slay the Spire, that'll be available until December 6th. So this is the biggest PS Now edition that we've had so far, and it's not crazy, but it's the most exciting one that we've had, right? Even with Virtua Fighter, where, as far as I know, we've never had a brand new game released day and date, not only with the PS Plus version, but just day and date in general on PS Now. That's the direction I want to see the service go in, so that's good to see. Moving on to our first news story. This doesn't happen too often, but when it does, we'll always talk about it here, which is a new firmware update for PS3, of all things. 4.88 just dropped, and it doesn't do much of anything of what we can see on the surface, right? It's one of those small incremental updates, probably cleaning up some exploits behind the scenes, or maybe it's something tied directly to the age of the system for system performance improvement. We do have a minor, not so good update on the CMOS battery issue. If you remember when we were following that a while back, Sony support was giving some responses that they were looking into it, and it seems like right now they're giving some canned responses in that they can't replicate the issue, which seems really strange because it's very easy to replicate the issue if you dismantle a PS3, take out that battery, and then all of a sudden your digital games will no longer start up. So I'm not really sure what's going on there, but yeah, there was a firmware update. If you're still using your PS3 but not turning it on too often, just know that you'll have a firmware update waiting for you. Next up, over on the PlayStation blog, Sony recently highlighted a number of new PSVR games that are coming out relatively soon, and it's great that they're still giving PSVR software a showcase on the PlayStation blog, especially when we have the next generation headset coming, and I think that might be, kind of overshadowing the current headset a little bit. But if you do have one right now, or we're always thinking about buying one, there is still a lot of great software coming. So they announced Arashi Castles of Sin. This is about a shinobi warrior and a hunting wolf companion. They fight together to protect their clan. Then there's Puzzle Bobble 3D Vacation Odyssey. Take on 100 levels of the classic bubble matching game in VR. Winds and Leaves, terraform the world and bring plant life back to a barren island with your own hands. After the Fall, grab your friends and fight for survival in this post-apocalyptic 4-player co-op. Then there's Fracked, ski, run, climb, and dive behind enemy lines in this action-packed adventure. Wanderer relives some of history's greatest moments in this time-traveling adventure. And then finally, Sniper Elite VR, scope and take aim in this stealth action first-person shooter set during World War II. This actually looks really cool. I want to try this one. Always interesting things coming to PSVR and all VR headsets. It's just a matter of Sony courting these developers, making it very accessible, and giving them a platform, and I really hope that same support carries into the next headset, which it seems like it will. Now for our next story, just a little PSA here, but the MyPlayStation services will be shutting down June 28th on the official PlayStation website, which, if you didn't know, this is basically a desktop site to access basic PSN features if you're not using the mobile app or you're not near your console, so you can look at things like trophies, messages, your friends list. I've only logged in a handful of times. I'm guessing they're probably shutting this down because of low engagement and low user activity. But if you didn't know this was a thing, then you have a short amount of time to log in, check it out, and then never think about it again, probably. Moving on to our next news story, it's been a little over a week since that state of play for Horizon Forbidden West, and the game's director is finally sharing some additional details, things that we were really looking forward to or we were curious about, like, for example, if there is going to be a 60 FPS performance mode, which you kind of assume. It seems like a safe bet, but he did recently confirm this as part of an interview with Singapore News Live, so there will be a quality mode, a performance mode. That state of play was showcased at 4K 30 FPS, so if you are getting really used to the 60 FPS option on console, if you're not often, switching between 30 and 60, it's a little jarring to go back to 30, so Horizon will feature a 60 FPS mode on PS5, which is great to hear. He was also asked directly about the potential of flying mounts. This is something which was famously looked into for the first game, and We were told that, PS4 hardware wasn't quite working for using a flying mount to fly around that environment, and I would imagine that was a problem with the world streaming that they had going on for the game. It's always dependent, right? Because there's plenty of planes and things like that in much larger, vaster open world games, but it really depends on the scope and the underlying code of that particular project. But anyway, that's what we heard about for the first game in Horizon. This time around, asked directly, he said, and I quote, "We are aware that this feature is very, very high on the wish list of many gamers, but I cannot confirm or deny anything about this. I can only talk about what's in the actual gameplay demo that we showed." He was also asked earlier if we can mount the Tremor Tusk, which is that big machine we saw towards the end of the state of play, and that was actually a straight up no. But they did elaborate further that they looked into that as well for the first game, and they decided not to because it just looked a little weird from panning the camera out so far, which may also have been a way to side skirt more technical problems because you have so much more on screen. But anyway, this wasn't a straight denial, so the fact that it wasn't possible in the first game, maybe there's something going on here where they learned a lot more from the original 2017 release. I mean, games can still improve on older hardware. I know that is still a concern for a lot of people here, but the fact that it wasn't a straight denial means that we could maybe see them exploring this going into Forbidden West. And that's another thing that we can talk about. Unsurprisingly, he gave the answer of, when it comes to a cross-gen release, that the game is not compromised or being held back in any way. I mean, kind of an expected answer. We're not going to get him directly saying that, yes, PS4 is, kind of tough to work with in terms of our limits and what we want to do, but you do have to remember this title did start on PlayStation 4 way back, and I would imagine they started right after they shipped the game in 2017, maybe a little bit after, but, this is something where PS5 kits weren't even out at that point, right? Sony probably didn't even brief their first party on what they were really doing with PS5 hardware. There were probably very few people that were well-versed on what Sony was even planning on doing with PS5 up to that point, so it is something where many games have definitely started their life as PS4 titles, and they can't think about that potential I/O throughput. So it is something where the game is fundamentally still going to be made with PS4 hardware in mind, and he even mentions that a lot of their playtesting is on PlayStation 4, which actually bodes well if you are planning on playing the game on a base PS4 console, as an example, right? So that's actually good to hear. But if you are playing on PS5, or if you have no problem waiting for the PS5 version, which I know is going to be the case for a lot of you, we are getting the expected confirmation that this game is going to be really flexing PS5 in every aspect. They're utilizing 3D audio, they're using some of the ray tracing stuff, DualSense features, the adaptive triggers, haptic feedback, all that stuff's in there, and of course the visual bells and whistles that we saw during that state of play. And we're also hearing that the game is in the near final stages of completion, a lot of bug fixing. They're working on the final cinematic of the game, so this is something where you can tell they're certainly trying to sprint to the end here to get a better idea of if the game will launch by this holiday season. But again, if it does miss it, I think we're just looking at Q1 at that point, which isn't really bad either. Just then it will look like 2021 being relatively dry from the Sony first party front. Now, moving into more of the cross-gen discussion, of course, yesterday we had the coverage of that PS blog post, which confirmed to us that not only is God of War delayed into 2022, but it will be cross-gen alongside Gran Turismo 7. We had a separate video covering that entire post, and we had a deep dive conversation on that, but we do have a rumor here from Andy Robinson over on Video Games Chronicle, where it was an opinion piece about how he feels in the cross-gen thing, and it was kind of the same sentiments that we had in our video yesterday. But we do have a rumor regarding GT7. Apparently this game was very recently made a cross-gen title for a PS4 release, where he says, and I quote here from the article, "Gran Turismo 7, after all, was outright advertised as a PS5 exclusive in December, although to be fair to Sony, I understand the decision to release a PS4 version was made only fairly recently. For Horizon Forbidden West and God of War, however, these games were always intended to release as cross-gen titles, I was told, but Sony did not mention the last-gen console during the announcement of either title." That was something that many brought up about those old trailers for GT7, because it very much did have a PS5 label on there, so that might explain what happened behind the scenes. And because it's a racing game, it's not that demanding. It doesn't, I know people hate the counter argument here, but there is scalability. It's not quite black and white as people make it out to be. That's why it really is highly dependent on the scope and scale of a project. And we have developers that have a 20-plus year history of working on consoles and console generations for the longest time when optical media was widely used. I mean, they've been used to this stuff for a very long time. That's why the same tricks and development techniques that were used on PlayStation 1 are still being used today on PlayStation 4, right? It's been the same deal the entire time. So it's not unfamiliar territory, but it's like we argued in yesterday's video. It's just now we might be facing a situation for, well, between first and even third party, if they continue to release previous generation games a little bit longer. Now we're facing a longer generational period until we see devs walk into these consoles with completely free and open game design, much like Sony was talking about, where you can load all your assets on the fly, no problem, and you really don't have to think about those development tricks anymore. Anyway, moving on to our next news story. For Destruction All-Stars, the game is now getting online bots to help fill out lobbies, and this will help for those low peak times. If we're talking, weekday, early morning, it might be difficult to find a full match, and so that's where the bots will come in. And this sounds bad, but keep in mind a lot of well-established large multiplayer games use this as well to keep the gameplay loop intact, so it's not unheard of, but obviously for this game, it is certainly struggling along. I'm keeping my eyes on it. There's not a whole lot of activity going on. I mean, you can reliably get into a match, but the subreddit's got very low activity. It's just, you can tell where this game's going, and most titles do go in this direction where it's like, okay, right now they're charging $20 for it. It recently saw a physical release at retail, $20. And, I think it would be in their best interest sooner rather than later to go free to play, because all games eventually end up doing this. So if this game wants a good shot, as more PS5s come into the market and more people want free games to jump into right away with their PS5s, I mean, this might be the title where you would want to do that, especially because Lucid Games, they've been doing a good job, but I don't know how long their contract is for providing updates for this game. It's probably a year, maybe 2 years, but there might not be a whole lot of time left to see this game rebound, and I would like to see that happen. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade Edition is coming out very soon, 1 week away. And just as a PSA, if you're planning on transferring your save file, then the PS4 version was recently updated, patch 1.02, and that will include on the main menu the upload save file option. So don't delete the game just yet. Make sure you transfer your save file first, whether you do that on PS4 hardware or playing the game on PS5 through backwards compatibility. You still have to transfer that save file from the game. So this was something people ran into, transferring their save files on other titles before. So it's kind of a pain, but just make sure you don't delete the game. Transfer that save file, then you're good to go when Intergrade comes out next week. Moving on to our next news story. Following the restructuring of Japan Studio a few months back now, we knew that Team ASOBI was staying and that they were expanding, but recently we had the formal introduction and public-facing display of Team ASOBI as a new, quote-unquote new, PlayStation Studios developer with a new logo, and also Nicolas Duché, the studio head, said over on the PlayStation blog, and I quote, "Following the release of Astro's Playroom for PlayStation 5, Team ASOBI is now spreading its wings and growing bigger. This is a very exciting time for the team, and we are very much looking forward to the next chapter. We wanted to take this chance to thank all of you, the PlayStation fans, for the kind words of support over the years, especially since Astro made its big debut on PlayStation 5 alongside the DualSense wireless controller." This really is the proper introduction of what now is coming off as a brand new SIE studio, right? Because Japan Studio is not really a thing anymore the way that it once was. This is now Team ASOBI, which they've been around since 2012, but kind of behind the scenes, right? Because that's when they were doing the experimental camera tech, and then they released the Playroom on PlayStation 4, which not many people had the chance to play. Then they did Astrobot Rescue Mission for PSVR. Again, not many people had the chance to play that until PS5, where now everybody with that console can play Astro's Playroom, and that is a fantastic, wonderful platformer. One of the best games available on PS5 right now that you can play. It really is that good. So we know that they're expanding, they're growing, and I'm thrilled. It's one of those things where it's bittersweet because of Japan Studio, what we formerly knew of that studio and all the IP that they put out throughout PlayStation history. But at the very least, we are getting some good out of it, which is Team ASOBI expanding and potentially putting out another fantastic platformer, which I would hope it's more of the Astrobot IP. I mean, I would really love to see a proper long-form $50, $60 platformer, which would be Astro. I would love that. So whatever they do next, we'll definitely keep our eyes peeled for it. And another team that we should be paying close attention to, which many seem to overlook, but it's PixelOpus. They are also a PlayStation Studios developer, the smallest one, but they put out Entwined in 2014 and then Concrete Genie in 2018. and they just recently had a new job listing, and it's very interesting. So they don't have job listings too often because they are a small team, but they're looking for a principal graphics programmer to, and I quote, to contribute to our development process as we tackle exciting innovation and rendering opportunities through a collaboration with Sony Pictures Animation. This position specializes in programming that centers around the graphics functionality of PlayStation 5 and the Unreal Engine 5 game engine, but with our small team, responsibilities will be diverse. This sounds really, really intriguing. My interest is absolutely piqued. I mean, Sony Pictures Animation, they put out Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is one of the most visually stunning, it's just a gorgeous looking movie to feast your eyes on if you haven't watched it before. The animation on that is incredible. And they've got a lot of other stuff coming up too. I mean, they are one of the biggest studios for animation. And then Unreal Engine 5, and we just talked about that. We can't wait for more developers to start really utilizing UE5, and we're going to see a lot of crazy things out of there, especially because that engine is all about efficiency too, so you're extracting a lot more for what you're doing on hardware. So, I mean, I think we might see something really special come out of PixelOpus, despite them being a small team. But Sony is investing, and they're not just investing in some of the big marquee studios like Naughty Dog and Sony Santa Monica. It's great to see that we're also seeing investment in studios like PixelOpus. And if this game is like the prior ones, where it's, you know, more artistically approached, niche in nature, the things that I like, and I know a lot of you like as well, we could see something really, really special come out of them. So I can't wait to see what this turns out to be. Now, for our next story, another project that we should be watching very closely, because this one's getting me really curious, is Abandoned. If you remember, a few months back, this was announced as a PS5 exclusive, and many mistook it for a secret Kojima game, which wasn't the case. This is a small team, Blue Box Game Studios, and they're putting out this title relatively soon. But we just found out over on Twitter that there's a new PS5 app that they're going to launch on June 20th, which will be a sort of gateway to images and trailers that I guess are rendered in real time on your PS5. So it's not quite something where you're just watching video files, I'd imagine. There's some sort of interactivity going on. I guess we'll get more insight once this application launches and we can start it and explore it. But that's what's getting me so curious about this game, is that well, one, it's inherently a PS5 exclusive, right? So it's not even available for PC or announced on PC. They were given a PlayStation blog post. They've got access to do this, you know, somewhat specialized application, which we've seen things like this in the past, but still, it's just something where I think there's, I think maybe Sony's a little bit more involved here. I don't know, right? I mean, it's just a little strange, so I can't wait to see more about what's going on with this game. Next up, Cyberpunk 2077. This game is still delisted from the PlayStation Store. You cannot buy a digital copy, and it seems like they're still working on that, so we don't really have a huge meaningful update here, but as part of CD Projekt Red's Q1 earnings, they did say, and I quote, "We cannot go into the details of where we are with that, but there is a process. We're in the middle of it. The conversations are happening. The decision will be announced when it's ready to be announced." It seems to me that, well, that reads almost like be patient. It doesn't seem like it's getting put back on the store anytime soon. Maybe Sony has some higher standards here, and they're not thrilled with how the situation played out to begin with for this game ever going back on the PS Store, because, well, they just put out this weird graph, too, of how many crashes are going on in the game, but there's no context as to how often those crashes are happening. It's just a graph showing that, yeah, over time it's slowly going down, but there's a slight spike with every single patch that we do put out, every patch and hotfix. Really weird. You know, they're omitting numbers here because they're embarrassed by the numbers that would be displayed. So I'm thinking that we're still going to be waiting quite a while until the game is actually back up on the PS Store, which is, well, not good for CD Projekt Red. And again, Sony's not really perfect here in this situation either, because they had such a poor refund policy, but what a weird mess. Moving on to our next news story. This is 100% a rumor, so as we often like to say, and as most others will say, take it with a grain of salt. This does not mean it's confirmed. But over on the Xbox Era podcast, Special Nick, whom, if you don't follow them, they've had a pretty good track record. I mean, there's certainly things that are wrong, right? It's hit and miss. Nobody's 100% correct. But when you are somebody that sometimes has some reliable sources, that information is always going to be subject to change. So that's why we're bringing it up here. They've certainly gotten some things before correct, but either way, they were talking about some rumors that they had recently heard, and one of them is relating to Sony here, where, if you don't know, Bioshock 4 has been in development for a little bit now, and this is a game that we should be seeing. You know, it's still probably a good ways out, but apparently he's heard that Sony has secured some sort of exclusivity. Not sure if it's timed or completely exclusive, but essentially this is something where Sony's getting involved with the game, and this would technically bode well with what we've seen and what we heard prior to PS5 coming out. Or no, I think it was shortly after PS5 came out, which was from Imran Khan hearing that Sony's approaching a lot of publishers, trying to work out some sort of exclusivity deal, whether that's marketing rights, timed exclusivity, or maybe titles in perpetuity, which they don't often do that. It happens sometimes, but not very often for the Sony side of things, but they have been doing a lot of the time stuff, and we're hearing that these are, games and franchises that Sony's looking into that you would typically think launch day and date on a number of platforms, and, well, Bioshock would certainly be one of them. I don't think this is in their best interest. I mean, yeah, they're doing a lot of timed exclusive stuff. I think you can get away with marketing rights for a lot of these games, and just the brand messaging alone really does a lot for you. I mean, we know that Sony's doing really well in terms of PS5 hardware. I find it interesting that they'd want to be so closely attached to a big franchise like Bioshock. So it's not something that I really care much for, but whenever we see a formal reveal of the game, we'll have our answer here. It's something where we had that rumor floating around about Sony approaching everybody prior to, say, the Bethesda acquisition. Like, one rumor was that they actually tried to secure Starfield, of all things, for some timed exclusivity. So I don't think this is like reactionary. Like, Sony's okay, like, we lost Bethesda, now we have to approach even more well-known franchises and secure them on PlayStation for a little bit. I don't think there's that much of that going on. I think they really are just kind of going a little crazy here with trying to make sure that PS5 really is the premier place to play and the premier console to have for all software, whether it's first party or all this third party stuff. Moving on to our next story, as we've mentioned before, Sony still has not laid out any sort of proper plans for an E3 season-esque show, and based off of the PS blog post, the state of play, it seems like if we do get something, it'll be further down the road, maybe like late July or going into August, not sure, but for the time being, we do have the E3 schedule laid out, and so if you're looking for some PlayStation stuff, we can say that the Square show is June 13th, that'll be 12:15 a PT or 3:30 ET, and for that we're expecting Eidos Montreal's Guardians of the Galaxy game that we've been looking forward to for a little bit there. Also Babylon's Fall, that was a PS4 game that's been MIA for quite a while now, so we should be seeing that. No confirmation about Final Fantasy 16 or this rumored Final Fantasy Origin game, but still a show where it might come up there. And then if you've got a Series S or X, that's actually the same day, a little bit earlier, and you can still watch that for some potential third-party stuff that always seems to crop up at any sort of platform holder show, so definitely something to keep your eyes on there. For Nintendo, that is June 15th, exclusively for Switch games, mostly releasing this year, so they're kind of purposely saying there's no Switch Pro stuff just yet unless I upload this, and then they start talking about it. In the Nintendo world, that's been, the crazy fire story for the past 3 weeks now, which it's one of those things where I'm glad I'm a single platform coverage kind of person here, so I can sort of enjoy that stuff without worrying about covering it, but that's June 15th. And yeah, E3 is pretty much here, so we've got a lot of news to be dissecting, and at least for PlayStation, we're not sure or what to expect really for how this really plays out the next month and a half or so. So as always, every Friday here, and videos in between if it's a big enough story. Now, with all that said, it is time to get to Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. If you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. Follow the link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the news stories that I want to talk about with you all from this past week. So we had 2 videos. First one talking about what Sony's E3 season plans might look like, so kind of the thing that we've been discussing so far. And then the PlayStation blog post, we covered that as well, so the cross-gen news and, Sony Ben's new IP and that stuff. You can go check out that conversation as well. And that's all I've got for you, but we're playing it by ear, and then we've got, other oddball videos that will still come out as they're normally scheduled, and that is it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.